Hey everybody, welcome to Technically Unraveled. As always, I am Kristen Fehrenbach, your host and also your Senior Director of Microsoft Go-to-Market here at Pax8. Thanks for joining today. We have a lot of stuff that's going to come up. We have a brand new Pax8 employee that's going to join us, but we'll get to him in just a bit. I want to go through a couple updates. Before I get too far, I want to make sure that you're liking, sharing, subscribing. I want you to stay up to date with all this content and the different shows that we have. But we'll jump right in. So we just hosted our virtual boot camp. There was over 500 registrations. Guys, this was such a good event. We've already got some really good feedback. You probably saw Britton, you saw Dom, you saw a lot of these people that just brought so much knowledge. So I want to say thank you to each and every one of you that came and participated. The questions are what make these events so impactful. So thank you for joining. I know that we have AWS boot camps coming up. We have our Microsoft monthly webinar that is coming. So that is actually going to be this next Monday. So if you've not gone through and registered for that, I do want to make sure that you're doing that. Get those on the calendar nice and early. So we will not be hosting one in June just because we have beyond, we've got so much stuff going on, but we'll pick back up in July on these monthly updates with everything Microsoft. All right, I want to make sure we cover this one because we've had a few questions. Want to just make sure it's top of mind. So Azure self-service model goes into effect. That's going to be May 1st. This is going to have Azure RIs and Azure Savings Plan. So please make sure you're reaching out to your account team if you have any questions about this self-service plan. They're ready to support you, answer any questions that you could have. But I know that it's just been top of mind for a few people. So as that date is very quickly coming up on us, May 1st here, I want to make sure we're talking about it one final time. Now, hands-on labs, we've talked about this quite a bit because it is such high demand. So we talked about it, and I think you filled up all of our hands-on labs, which is incredible. So wanted to make sure that we opened up additional opportunity to everybody that is in North America and Canada. So there are new dates that are going to be in June. So make sure that you're filling out that form below. It's going to get you all of the information. You can set up on a wait list. You can get it scheduled, all of that good stuff. Please make sure you're checking out those hands-on labs because it's free to you as a partner. So please come and join them. We want to make sure that these are impactful. Last thing, I know we talked about Directions North America and what an amazing time we had talking about dynamics and all of those great things. If you are at Directions Asia, Matt Batterby's there, our whole Pax8 team, they're running around. Please make sure you say hey to them, get a selfie, post that on LinkedIn, tag us. We love all of those great things. Those wrap up all of our updates for the day. I do have the pleasure to introducing Mr. David Powell. Thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here, Kristen.
Excellent. So I think that you are still like really fresh to Pax8. How long have you been here?
I started on the 3rd, so I've been here 24 days.
Oh, so 24 days, you basically have the whole lay of the land. We're ready to hit the ground running, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm fully immersed in all things Pax8, 24 days in. But it's been a whirlwind start. It's been fun. I mean, the thing is that Pax8 is great. The culture is great. I've watched Pax8 grow up from when, way back in the day when they were wearing the flight suits at the trade shows and all kind of stuff. So it's been really fun to watch Pax8 go to this point, and it is an awesome opportunity for me to join.
Oh, the good old flight suits. It's funny. I think those are still deep in the closet somewhere, but I mean,
I
maybe we
heard
can
they were
break
hot,
those out
made you
one day.
sweaty. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if they ever washed them, so we're just gonna maybe steer clear of that one. So,
Yeah.
okay, David, where did you come from? So you've been here for 24 days. Where were you at previously, and why Pax8?
Yeah, so I've been around the MSP cybersecurity industry a long time. So I was at a big MSP, and then I was at a company called Logic Monitor, and we transacted. And then I did a big MSP roll up. We bought 4 MSPs and put them together. Then I was at Perch Cybersecurity, and Perch Cybersecurity got acquired by ConnectWise. Then I went to serve out my non compete as president of a software company out in Los Angeles. When my non-compete expired, I came back into cybersecurity at Evo Security, and I was going to be at Evo for a nice long time. And when Pax8 came calling saying, "Hey, can we talk to you about coming and helping us out with our cybersecurity go to market with our MSPs? And what can we do with large MSPs?" And I said, man, it'd be hard to leave someplace I had just joined, but the opportunity was too great to come over and work with people like you, Kristen. And so I
Awesome.
was happy to come over and get started.
Well, it's funny. I was glad I got to meet you on, I think, your third day here at Pax8. And, in traditional fashion, we started the meeting, no introductions, just went straight to it. And then I was like, wait, I don't even know who you are. So thanks for 24 days in jumping on a live webcast with me. Before we start, because obviously, MSPs from the whole rundown you just gave us, this partner channel. Before we dive into that, I want to start with a fun fact because we love
Sure.
those here at Pax8. David, what do you got for us today?
Yeah, so my fun fact is that I'm married to the girl I dated in high school. So, and even more fun than that, we went to prom together. So there's the
Oh
prom
my
picture.
goodness.
And, I still have an let's be real, impressive head of hair. It may be gray, but it is impressive nonetheless. And so that was prom back then in '92. And the other picture was from us on her birthday trip to Paris about 3 weeks before I started at Pax8. So we've been together a long time and two
Incredible.
wonderful kids. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And you went to prom together, and man, that dress that she's got, that blue dress is, I like it. I like
Yeah,
it.
the blue dress was
All
great.
right. I'm
What's
glad
funny
we
is
get
the
to know
prom
you
dress has
and the
come back
family.
around. Yeah.
They sure have. I'm not breaking out my prom dress. That was horrifically embarrassing. I think it looked like Lisa Frank. I don't know if you know who that is, David, but it looks like Lisa
I
Frank just
don't
threw up on my dress. So not great. So
I don't know who that is. That's a bad visual nonetheless. So
there you go. Exactly. It's a lot of rainbows and a lot of color, and it
gotcha.
was not great for any of us at the time. So all right, let's talk about a little bit about cybersecurity because
Yeah.
I think it's super important that we continue talking through this message because there's no place to hide anymore. And I know that you have an extensive background, and I know that a lot of partners are looking to improve their own cybersecurity. So, if we have partners that are interested in doing that, David, what's step one? Like, where do we even start? Because sometimes that's a big onion to start peeling back, isn't it?
Yeah, so I really think that the whole idea is that we want them to improve their cybersecurity first before they go sell cybersecurity to their end users, right? Is that you can't sell what you don't do. So the analogy that I use oftentimes around this is this idea of like getting fit. So if I decided I wanted to get fit, and so I go to the Nike store and I buy all new gear, I join a gym, and I get the gym ready to roll and all this kind of stuff. I go online and find a personal trainer. And so I'm looking through the personal trainer and I find one and I hire them and they're going to come help me get fit. And then as I'm standing there in the gym ready to roll and this guy, walks in the door, I'm never, ever, ever going to take personal fitness advice from this guy. Right. And so unfortunately, that's the MSP. Lots of times that's how they feel is that they are not fit themselves. So how in the world can they
Okay.
go talk to their MSP customers about being fit? So what we really want to do is like make sure we have both those stages. Is that we've been doing these security consults with our SSC team to help
Yes.
improve the cybersecurity maturity of our partners. And then what I'm here to do is help build that program to take out that into their customer base and equip MSP partners of ours to sell cybersecurity into the market.
That's incredible because, when we talk about cybersecurity, it's kind of like back in the day when you said, oh, the cloud, right? Like it's kind of this elusive, where do I start? If you want to start throwing out acronyms, I mean, we've got CMMC happening. There's all these different security measures that we can start to get going on. But I think at the same time, it can just be a little overwhelming. So, how should MSPs really think about their own cybersecurity risks? Because I know that our end users are concerned. What about our
Yeah,
actual
so that
MSPs?
Kristen, that's a great question. I mean, a lot. I mean, if you pay much attention, there's been article after article after article of MSPs that have been breached over time, and that's not a good thing. And that the bad guys are coming in and they're using the tools MSP has to inflict malware into their customer base. So the way I like to characterize this is to think about like an apartment building. So if there's an apartment building and you and I were bad guys and we are going to try to go break into all these apartments, right? So each one had to kick in the door. We had to steal their TV, steal their computers, get all that stuff out. There's a lot of opportunity for us to get caught. There's a lot of opportunity for, people to find us. It's a lot of work. Or we could just break it in the supervisor's office, steal the master key, and just go simply unlock all those doors. MSPs are that. They're the supervisor. They have the administrative credentials into all their downstream clients. And so what they really need to understand is they have the aggregate risk of all of their clients that really kind of belongs to them. So when you look at that apartment building, we have the aggregate risk of all those apartments as opposed to just like the one that we're in. So I think that's what MSPs really have to understand is that it's important for them to do it, but ultimately the risk downstream rolls up to them, and that's a significant amount of risk that they have to think about.
I love the analogy that you're talking about because I mean, if I've got my master key, I'm just going to go start unlocking, and now anything's up for the taking at that point.
That's right.
And I don't think. I think it can be just kind of that awkward conversation sometimes on like, hey, you know what? I know that everybody's talking about cybersecurity. Microsoft's, it's top of mind. We just saw the earnings come out. We saw all kinds of stuff that's happening. But, I think a lot of times we say, hey, how do I start? And I think that looking internally is just key.
Mm-hmm. And then I think, where we take that out is like, how do you blend that into, how do you have that conversation? So as an MSP, you look at it yourself and say, okay, I've got this stuff I have to do, but where do you really start, to your point? And then when you go look at your MSP downstream customers, I think that you have to create something actionable for them. And there's a lot of fear and uncertainty around that. So how do you, create a talk that they want to engage with you on this instead of like they're so
Sure.
frightened to have that conversation?
So I know that a lot of MSPs, they might start with assessments, right? And
Yeah.
like, what is your thought there? Because I mean, look, I know that here at Pax8, I mean, we offer a free security assessment to try to help these end users. But what are your thoughts and feelings when we say, hey, you know what? They start with an assessment. What do we move forward with? What does that path look like?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of MSPs make this mistake where they go do an assessment and they basically come and say, "Hey, Kristen, here's all the stuff you suck at, right? Here's all the things that you have as a problem." And what that does is that creates like inaction, right? Because you look at all that, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, there's no way I'll be able to do all those things. I don't have the budget to do all that stuff." So what our coaching is how do you get them to give them something actionable that they can do now? So the example I use in this is like if I came to your house there, I understand you live in Texas and y'all have a lot of humidity and moisture. And so if I came into your house and said, "Hey, Chris, let's rip out all the sheetrock," you're like, "Oh, Dave, I don't want to do that." But if I could show you that you had leaky pipes behind your wall, right? Cut your sheetrock out, shine a flashlight back there, show you that these pipes are leaking. Now at this point, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't stay in this house with leaky pipes. I got
It
to
gives
do
me a
something." So
starting point.
that's exactly right. And no one is ever going to say, no MSP is going to walk in and say, like, "Hey, Chris, I'm here to talk about cybersecurity." You're like, "Oh, you know what? I have thousands of dollars a month I've just been waiting to spend on
Yep.
cybersecurity. Thank you for coming and talking to me," right? It's always going to have to be a
Yes.
reallocation from somewhere else. And so give them something actionable instead of giving them something that seems so daunting it creates inaction.
And you know what? I think so often these security assessments come out and I don't know, they're 15, 20 pages long and it talks about all these different risks, right? Because there's always somewhere you can tighten up, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I'm going to
Always.
scrub this house. It's going to be clean, but I'm going to miss this fan blade. And there's always
Mhm.
somewhere to start. So how do partners know, hey, you know what? We might have done the security assessment, but this is where I want to start. Like how should partners really look at these large assessments to say, this is top line biggest risk?
Yeah, it really comes down to the value of the assets you're trying to protect, right? So I tell this story where this friend of mine has a friend who has 6-car garage, and he was looking at selling one of his cars. I was looking at buying it, so we go over there, and in the far right corner of his garage, and the sixth one is this Ferrari. And so my friend Derek's like, "Hey Joe, can we take the Ferrari out?" And Joe's like, "Yeah, the keys are in it." And I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, the keys are in it?" And Joe says, "Well, yeah, if the garage door's down, the car's secure." And that, unfortunately, is the way a lot of MSPs look at it. It's like if the perimeter is secure, everything behind it is secure. When really you need layers of security. So the garage door should be down, the Ferrari should be locked, the door from the garage inside the house should be locked, and the keys to the Ferrari should be in a lockbox. Now, if that's a beige 93 Camry, you can maybe just stick with the garage door being down, right? Is that it's not a valuable asset, so you don't have to protect it quite as much. But if you've got a Ferrari in there, then that's a very valuable asset. You want layers of security to protect that. Similarly, I think that MSPs need to have conversations with their end users and say, what's the value of the data you're trying to protect? And we had a client one time up in New York, and they were a homeless shelter. And we were talking about cybersecurity, and they're saying, "Oh, well, we don't have anything that the bad guys would want." Well, upon further review, what we found is that they have a database, a donor database, of some of the richest people in the country, right? And they have home addresses and emails and cell phone numbers and all this kind of stuff. And when we were started talking to them, saying, "Well, there's reputational risk if that got breached," suddenly they're like, "Oh, we do need a lot of cybersecurity to protect this something." So they had something valuable. They didn't recognize it was valuable, but having that conversation revealed that, and then we were able to put measures in place to protect that.
I just don't think it's a one size fits all. And oh no, there's a fly. This is my life, isn't it? So I don't think it's always a one size fits all. And I think that a lot of times it's identifying that, right? Like how they don't even realize all of these donors that are putting in so much money, their information's at risk just because that's not what's top of mind. So I think
Mm.
it's really behind the curtain of saying, hey, you know what? You can have all of these great tools and services. One, are they on properly? Like, do we have the right tools in place? Are you utilizing them? And then are we really assessing what actually are we looking to protect? And do you actually have that full scope? Because I think it's such a broad conversation.
Oh yeah. And I think, they have a misunderstanding, I think, of the risk is that a lot of small business owners will look and they'll see the Wall Street Journal or some news thing and they hear about Target has a breach or some large company has a breach. They're like, well, that's not me. I'm a small business. But so I think the way this plays out is that there is a stigma related to talking about it. So if you and I lived in the same neighborhood and a house was broken into, Facebook would light up. Oh, there was a break in our neighborhood.
Sure.
We all get together out in the street and talk about how we're going to be extra vigilant, all this kind of stuff. But in the business world, no one talks about it. So the problem is that businesses kind of allegorically think that their business is in like the nice part of town where all the nice houses are,
Sure.
right? And so they think, oh, we're safe, we're secure, we're in this great part of town. When really their business is in the worst part of town, the place no one wants to be, right? Because all these breaches are happening all around them, but they just don't know it. So they're blind to this. So if they're really truly aware of the number of breaches happening and the true risk they have, I think they'd be more interested in acting. But instead, they have this false security around, like, oh, well, we're in a good area. We don't have to worry about it just because there's a stigma. So it doesn't get talked about. It doesn't get presented. They don't know that this is something they need to act on. So they kind of just hide in their hole, like, oh, well, that's out there somewhere else. Big companies have to
Sure.
worry about that, not someone my size. And
Not
the
just the
real the
little
real
guy,
numbers are daunting. The real numbers are scary for
the amount of
everybody. Every business is
SMBs.
getting breached. Yes.
That's who they're looking at, are these small, medium
Yeah.
businesses, because to be able to financially recover is next to impossible for a lot of people once they have one of these breaches, right?
Yeah. And I think the data shows that like 29% of customers say that their MSP doesn't talk to them until after they've been breached. That's like the wrong time. I mean, they're going to buy probably then, but you should have been doing a lot more to protect them because I've never met a company that's experienced a breach that if you said, could you have paid X amount of dollars to avoid being in this scenario? Every single one of them would have done it, right? All of them would have said, oh my gosh, I would have paid thousands of dollars not to have to deal with this breach. But when they're there, that's the time to sell. But you obviously would like to try to prevent that instead of responding to it.
Sure. I heard somebody recently, they were like, well, if you go out and you're at the bar and you have a few beverages, do you take the Uber home or do you just take the risk and like hope that you make it depending on what happens? And I was like, do you know how many Ubers you could take? All of
Oh
them.
yeah,
You
that's
could take
right.
all of the
All of them.
Ubers. I think it's
Yeah.
very similar.
There's in the era of Uber, there is no reason for the Dewey. But in cybersecurity, there are layers of security that you should just be doing that's table stakes. And a lot of people are just taking that risk all the time unnecessarily.
It's just I think that one graphic really showed it well when, they think they're so nice in this nice little neighborhood until you log on to next door. Whatever happens in next door, this app where everything's bad and everything's crazy, right? But I really do think it, you're not in that nice area because everybody's looking for that easy way, that master key to be able to get into all of these different accounts. And
Oh
the
yeah.
liability is so high for these partners.
Oh yeah, and Kristen, one time my wife had her purse stolen when she was at the community pool, and we thought that they must have
No.
busted out a window or something like that. Turns out my son, he was young. He didn't like lock the car when he went to go get something out of it. And I was talking to the policeman, and he says, "Oh, Mr. Powell," he said, "most of the time they're not smashing the windows; they're just walking through the parking lot, pulling door handles, looking for the one that's unlocked. And if
Yep.
you don't have minimal levels of cybersecurity, you're the car with the laptop in the seat with the door unlocked, right? And so you just want to make it a little bit harder each time for the threat actors, and then they just move on, just like water finds the point of least resistance. That's what your threat actors are looking for. Where is it easy? What's the point of least resistance? So you just want to make it a little bit hard for them, and then keep making it a little harder and harder over time.
It baffles me when people don't even have MFA turned on. David, what what are
Ah.
your thoughts on MFA? Okay, we're on the same page?
Oh yeah, so Microsoft said that only 32% of the Office 365 or M365 users have MFA turned on. That is
No.
ridiculous, right? That is like, again, leaving your keys in the car with the doors unlocked in a bad part of town. I mean,
That's
that is like the easiest thing.
insane.
Now, you want to know like a fun story, Kristen? Is we had
Yeah.
ethical hackers at a previous job, okay? And so I asked them, I'm like, how do you guys get around MFA? And so this is the story that they told. So they would phish your credentials, right? And they would
Yep.
get them, and then they would go to Microsoft's site and gonna do a password reset. And then when it got to the MFA part, they would have gotten your cell phone number out of your email signature, and they would call you. And everyone's so scared of being the person who clicked the link, they would play on that. So they would call and they say, "Kristen, hey, this is David from IT. Look, you're not in trouble yet. We don't have to tell HR, but you've been compromised. So, hey, again, don't worry about it right now. We haven't had to notify anything, but we're going to isolate your mailbox, get it cleaned up, and then hand it back to you in an hour. So, we're going to go on.
What
And
is
again,
that
we haven't had to,
passcode?
yeah, we're about to send you a passcode, read it back to us. And
Nope.
people would panic and they'd be like, 0697. And then they would be like, okay, thanks so much. And we'll get you squared away here soon. And, people just fall for that because they're so scared. But at least that's easier than just sending you the link that says your Netflix account is about to go dormant, reset your password here, that kind of stuff. So it's
Oh
crazy.
my gosh.
Crazy.
And I mean, they're getting more clever. And I think that that's the biggest thing is that they're more lucrative now. It's not just somebody picking up the cell phone and calling, saying, "Hey, what's your bank account number?" Like these are
Yeah.
lucrative things that are happening
Oh,
and they're
there are hackers that have
believable.
retired. They've made enough money, they've retired. You can go find their blogs. There is ransomware as a service. You can go to a place on the dark web and buy ransomware on a subscription model that you can use to hack other people. I mean, it is a fully monetized economy around breaching people, which is insane.
Yeah, it's funny. I think everybody on the back end of this call is like rapidly changing all their passwords right now. But I
Oh,
think there's just so many things that you can do to be able to, one, make it a little bit more secure. And you're just deterring people. It's
oh
locking
yeah.
the doors to your car, things like that. A lot of it's deterrent. And then
Well,
once you
yeah.
get past some of these deterrents, it goes a little bit deeper, right? But a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, the door's locked. It's a lot of work to break that window. Let me just move on to the
Right.
next one."
Well, in like the one-time passwords, I mean, I would never show on a live stream my passwords, right? But I'm willing to show you like these keys because in 60 seconds they're going to change, to something else.
Sure.
And that's where MFA is really powerful that way because you don't have to have 60 character password with a hieroglyphic and the hair of a unicorn and all this kind of stuff in it. You can have a pretty
Because I'm not
normal
going to remember that,
password.
David.
It's impossible. It's impossible. But with a one-time password on MFA, now you don't have to have the crazy long password because you can back it up
Yep.
with the OTP. So
And I mean, let's be honest. If I can figure out MFA and how to log into things, everybody else can too. So I feel confident saying that to everybody.
that's right. Is that maybe that's a good cybersecurity marketing message? If Kristen can do it, anyone can.
If Kristen can do it, you're good. Yep. I think that's what we go with. So
That's
look,
right.
David, I think, why are MSPs a little worried about talking to clients about cybersecurity? Because I feel like there's a little bit of a stigma there. So
Yeah.
why is that?
The easiest answer for that is that there's this sense around people, the end users, equate cybersecurity with technology. And then they think technology is what I'm hiring you, the MSP, for. So MSPs are scared because I don't want to come talk to you and say, hey, Kristen, I'm here to talk to you about cybersecurity. And the first thing you're going to say to me is like, whoa, aren't you already doing that for me? And now I'm on defense. Now I'm having to justify my existence, right? Why haven't I been doing this for you or whatever? So we really have to educate the MSPs on how to bifurcate that message. And you have a technology conversation over here and a risk conversation over here. And the risk conversation is a cybersecurity conversation. The analogy I use on that one is like if I stood in front of you and said, hey, Kristen, I'm going to punch you in the face. You're like, oh. And I'm like, there are things you can do to try to avoid it. There's things you can do to make it a little less. There's things you can do to decrease the frequency of which I punch you in the face, but I'm going to punch you in the face. And that's really the threat actors. They want to get in. There's things you can do to limit the blast radius if you do get breached. There's
Yep.
things you can do to make it harder, but there's not an option that says the threat actors are not going to try to breach me, right? So
Sure.
it's this sense of inevitability you kind of have to have. So the MSPs are scared of that conversation just because they're not used to having risk conversations. They feel comfortable in tech conversations, speeds and feeds and blinking lights and all that stuff, but they're not comfortable going in and
Sure.
saying like, how much are you willing to pay to avoid getting punched in the face? It's just a different conversation.
I think that's a great point because they've got your managed services, right? The other part is the risk, and they're separate.
Correct.
And I think that is the perfect way for people to start having that conversation. Like, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
We have all your licenses. You can get into Microsoft Word. Your email's great. All of these things. Let's talk about how do we reduce your risk overall. So I think that that's
Correct.
a great starting point.
Correct. And I think price those separately because then people can see how much they're spending on risk different than they're spending on technology. And when they start doing things like cybersecurity insurance, then they can see I'm spending this amount to mitigate the risk that comes with this cybersecurity insurance policy, which has certain requirements around it typically. So
Goodness, I feel like this show has flown by today. David, you've got to come back. I just need your commitment before we even let you leave that you're going to come back and we're going to have more of just a deeper conversation.
I'd be happy to anytime, Kristen. You're fun to be
Excellent.
around, and I enjoy the conversation. So
Thank you so much, David. All right, we will see you next time. Thanks for jumping in. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Technically Unraveled this week. Lots of stuff coming up. You've got the game tomorrow. You've got a new show on Tuesdays. That's why you want to make sure that you're liking and subscribing. All right, so next week, we have our Matt Batterby coming back. Super professional guy. He's over there in Asia right now, going through everything dynamics. You've got Elliot Chandler always backing him up. I look forward to talking to Matt next week. We will see you then. Bye, everybody.